This is we're a senior living operator of senior living communities. We operate roughly 30 or so communities in about 10 states. We've been doing it for about 30 years. And so we thought, why not put some of the experience and knowledge that we've put together over those 30 years to some good use and start doing some broadcasts like this on Facebook. And so that's what you are watching today. So today's topic, we are talking about resident care and the nursing and all of the care type aspects that go into our communities. Before we get too far into it, I do want to share with you, or like you to share actually, if you click the share button right below the video, think of someone who may find use in this information or could find value in it. Click that share button and share it with them, tell them about it. And then also be sure to click follow to follow the Arbor company, and that'll just let you know whenever we have videos like this that are going live. Now this is a live broadcast, and although you could be watching it a little bit after the fact, but feel free to leave us some comments below if you have any other questions that we don't answer today, and we'll be happy to answer those as soon as we can. Now I am joined today by Francine O'Neill and Susie Price with the resident care team here at the Arbor Company. Francine is our Senior Vice President of Resident Care, which means she's involved or responsible for all things nursing and care within the company. And Susie is the Resident Care Director at Arbor Terrace at Hamilton Mill in the Atlanta area, one of our fabulous new communities. It's an assisted living community. So Francine, how long have you been with the Arbor Company?
About 8 years.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
And Susie?
About a year and a half.
Okay, and that's fantastic. So before we get too far into this, what is resident care? I mean, I think a lot of people have different notions about what senior living is. We kind of go from the realm of, some people might see it as like a 55 plus, active senior lifestyle community on up to full on, nursing home or hospice care. And there's a lot of preconceived notions that people may have. Just in a few words, what is resident care and how does nursing work in senior living?
Sure. Well, in our assisted living communities and our memory care communities, we do have teams of resident care staff headed up by people like Susie, RNs or LPNs, that are charged with identifying how much help residents might need. We have residents that move in that are fairly independent and might just need some reminders or a little help getting things done. And we have other residents that need a lot more assistance. So our caregivers, our medication aides, our nurses, they coordinate all that care. And they work with the residents to make sure we're meeting their preferences and providing things the way they want them done.
Okay, so it's pretty much anything to do with nursing and any kind of care that the resident may need throughout their day. Okay.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. So I want to get to know the two of you a little bit and let our viewers at home get to know you as well. So Susie, let me turn to you. How long have you been a nurse, first of all?
A long time.
A long time.
30 years.
Wow, 30 years. But
Yeah.
you've only been here at the Arbor Company for a little more than a year.
Correct.
And how long have you been a nurse for senior living or senior care?
In different capacities throughout my career, I was in the coronary care unit, and we would follow those patients and take them through the cardiac rehab, and then I did outpatient cardiac rehab. I worked in the emergency room. I worked with a plastic surgeon, and I worked in pediatrics.
Okay. And so how did you step into your role that you're in today?
Kind of accidentally, in a good way.
Yeah.
I had a different job that I really enjoyed, and a friend of mine had a mother who was actually at an Arbor memory care unit and was in her quite far down her journey of dementia. And she had told me how much she was pleased with the care there, and as she described that, I was very interested in seeing it for myself. So I went over to visit my friend's mother, and I literally walked in the door and kind of went, I'm home. There was an aha moment. And so it just so happened that there was an opening at that particular Arbor for a resident care director. And after a lot of communication back and forth, I made the decision to come and join the Arbor Company, and I'm very glad I did. Haven't looked back since.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So Francine, I guess I could ask you the same question. How did you you've been a nurse for a number of years.
Yes.
So how did you get into senior living and I guess into this role that you're in today?
Yeah. Well, I started out, I had taken my boards and was waiting for the results and had moved to California. So I couldn't work as a graduate nurse. So I took a position in a nursing home as a nursing assistant. And at the time, California was really on the cusp of all the subacute models and everything. So I had really gained a lot of experience with geriatric residents and patients that had a lot of clinical needs. So that was really my first exposure, and it was a lovely, lovely nursing home, and the director of nursing really was a mentor to me. She let me do things really she probably shouldn't have let me do.
We won't tell.
We won't tell. But that was really how I started. And then once I got my license, like almost every new RN, I felt like I really needed to go work in a hospital. That was like something I needed to check off my list. So I did work for a period of time on a medical surgical unit in an acute care hospital, and eventually ended up coming back to long-term care. And along the way, I had wonderful mentors that encouraged me to go on and get another degree, and just really it just continued. So at one point I went back to acute care, worked in hospital administration, oversaw home health and hospice and rehab, departments. Took a little bit of a break, stayed home with my son for a few years, and moved to Georgia. I was watching the Arbor company build the Crabapple location, and I remember driving by one day and my husband saying, "You should go in there and apply for a job." And I said, "Oh, you're crazy? You should just walk in." And several months later, the Arbor company was advertising for a new position in nursing, and I applied and met Mary Campbell, and that was it. She sealed the deal for me. Right. So that's how I ended up at the Arbor company.
Okay, fantastic. So both of you have worked in other types of nursing, and I would have to say, before I came into senior living, you think about nursing, and you said, Francine, that you sort of feel obligated when you become a nurse to go work in a hospital for a little while. And I've always thought about, okay, nurses are in hospitals or nurses work at doctor's offices, pediatrics or what have you. But you don't necessarily realize that, but there's also nurses in like skilled nursing units, like nursing homes. And then I think what makes it a little bit different perhaps in senior living, and this is what I wanted to ask you, is the nurse in a senior living building like we have tends to be the care leader. So you're not necessarily one among many, many, many nurses like you might be in a hospital. You're kind of the top. So I guess in that sense, what makes nursing in senior living different from other types of nursing out there? Either of you, really?
Well, I would say one of the things that nurses in general, we talk about a lot in nursing, is the burnout rate. And the problem that we have, because as we have kind of bumped up our levels of care and technology, nurses end up doing a lot of paperwork and don't get a lot of bedside time in the hospital. And that can be very frustrating if you're a nurse, because usually the reason you went into nursing was to have that kind of a relationship and have those deep connections. So something I love about long-term care and my job now is that I can develop those deep relationships with the family members, with the residents, and those are very satisfying to both me and the resident, and I feel like that's what it's all about. And so it's a very enriching job, and it's a multifaceted job. You get to develop many different areas of nursing.
Okay. So Francine, when you first came into senior living nursing, did you have any aha moments or any surprises that you didn't expect coming in?
Well, senior living has really just evolved. When I started in it, probably 30 years ago too, it was very different. And the whole healthcare system has changed. And people that used to stay in the hospital, for post-surgery are now outpatient surgery patients. They're coming home the same day. And the residents and patients that were in med-surg units are going into the subacute rehab centers. So consequently, the residents moving into our communities are much older when they come to us and frailer. So I think, I think the aha moment really, or the aha issue is that you really do a lot of nursing in senior living. And I think people that haven't experienced it don't realize it. It's a great position, especially for the directors, because they have the opportunity to use their nursing skills, use their management skills. We have a lot of innovative technology. They're resident advocates. They're counselors to the family members. So it's a great setting to use all of those skills.
That's great. That's great. So, Susie, what does an average day look like for you as a resident care director in a building?
There's kind of no such thing.
Is every day exactly the same?
No,
or?
no. And that's another thing I love about it is there's never a dull moment. There's the day goes by quickly, and there's so many different areas that you're involved in. Usually when I come, I kind of do rounds and make sure that there's I gather information from my nurse and the folks who are coming off their shift to see, do I need to check on anyone? Has anyone gone in the hospital? We have meetings where we collaborate with the other leadership team. I meet with home health, hospice. I go over to the hospital. I do assessments out in the community. I do education. Tomorrow I'm meeting with a group, grief support group. So there's so many different areas that you're involved in on a daily basis. And I do a weekly report, which is my most favorite thing to do.
And
Mine.
how many live Facebook broadcasts do you do in a given week? It's a lot now, right? This is
so
the only
many.
one, right? So you mentioned coordinating with other departments in the community, and that kind of stood out to me. There's a thing I know, Francine, that you kind of helped pioneer called this whole care coordination aspect. And can you describe a little bit about what that is and why that's important?
Sure. I think in other settings, it's probably akin to an interdisciplinary care conference, but essentially we gather all of the team leaders from the various departments. So we have the resident care team there, the executive director is always part of this, our engagement directors, our dining people, are usually involved, and they collaborate on one or two key issues that might be impacting the community at that time. And it could be a resident-specific, issue we're trying to address and problem solve and come up with a collaborative plan around, or it could be something that's a community-wide new program or plan we're trying to put in place.
Yeah.
So they meet regularly. We, we problem solve. We have a little problem-solving, algorithm that we use, and come up with some plans, and then they revisit those. And the most important thing, though, is getting it back to our frontline staff, because they're the ones closest to our residents, and it's important that they know what those plans are and can help us.
So give me an example of a plan or maybe a problem that you needed to solve for a particular resident, and the sort of the level that you get into with that.
I can think of a situation that comes up quite often is you may have a resident that's living in assisted living, but the team is seeing some changes. They're having more difficulty keeping up in the regular legacy activity program, or they're having trouble in the dining room, ordering off the menu. They're needing a little bit more help getting dressed, or they're forgetting where their apartment is. So the team sees this as maybe a transition, a time to maybe consider moving into another neighborhood. So they collaborate, they share what their observations are, and talk about how they might make that transition happen, and work with the family on getting that in place. Would you say
Yes.
that's
And
a common?
something I love about the Arbor company is that from the first day of training, we don't just train our resident care staff to know what are some of the changes you will see with memory loss or progression with a physical or a cognitive decline. We train every single employee in the building, and they all go through dementia training. So I might have a housekeeper who comes to me and says, I've noticed that a certain resident, her room is a little bit disheveled, and she was always very tidy. you know, the kitchen will come and say, you know, so-and-so's kind of having some trouble when she's eating. I'm hearing her coughing a little bit. So we have eyes on every single individual in the building, and we have little note cards that say stop watch, and so they will slide those under my door, and I have a little stack of those every morning because every single staff member in the entire building is looking out for those residents.
So it's really everyone
It
who
is.
works in the building has some responsibility for that. 'Cause I guess you
Yes.
get to know different residents in different ways. each
Absolutely,
staff
and it's
member.
very valuable to have that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So let's change gears for just a moment. What advice do you have for someone who might be considering a career in senior living? Any thoughts?
Well, I mean, I would encourage people to explore it. And, you know, whether they're on the care side of things or they're interested in customer focused, you know, we have our resident relations people, we have our dining staff, there's lots of opportunities. And I think what people don't realize is even though our communities may seem, you know, fairly small in terms of number of employees, there are lots of paths for people. And we've had a number of employees that have moved up, been promoted, gone back to school, you know, where we've supported them in those efforts and recognized as they've gained new skills and given them, you know, opportunities. I would say just come in and try it. You know, we have a lot of people, it's a second career. You know, they come back to work after staying home maybe with children. They decide they want to work in the engagement department, or they love to be around people, so they're at the front desk and all kinds of things.
So, and Francine, when you are, when you need to hire a resident care director in a building, what are you looking for in that person?
Well, I'm looking for someone that really has a commitment to long-term care and seniors. I'm looking for someone that is multifaceted. You know, they're a good clinician, but they're also great with staff, and they're great with families and residents. Good problem solvers, adept